Good. So yes, let's learn a little bit about me. Thank you so much for that introduction, Allison. I'm a CMU grad, 1993. I graduated from industrial design program, and that was in the CFA. I have a minor in industrial management, which I think today would be Tepper School of Business, something, whatever, way cooler than what it was. But nonetheless, I mean, my classes were in Posner, not for nothing. I was on the crew team, hence my where's Waldo adorable little tank. I know, super cute. And that's my husband, Sean. He was also on the crew team. Yes, he always won more medals than I did. Nonetheless, I took a very circuitous route coming out of school, which a lot of my peers actually did. I think it might have been a little bit to do with the economy, whatever. I worked for a construction company in marketing, and then I also did marketing for a tech company, communications company. I traveled the world. I had some kids. Cut to today, I have two grown boys who actually are students here at Carnegie Mellon. Weird, I know, but not as weird as some of the people who I've met. They have like their whole families go here, so we don't have quite that, but nonetheless. And as Allison said, I run a company actually that my father started about 50 years ago, and we help nonprofit organizations through their whole life cycle. So I help nonprofits start up and go through that whole process. I help them through that mid phase where they're like, hang on, I need to grow. How do I do that? What does my structure look like? And then I help them with formal partnerships, which usually ends up in mergers or some sort of formal agreement. And I spend a lot of time actually doing that. So enough about me. Since I spend so much time working with nonprofits, I've been chatting with Leah, and we decided that it made sense to kind of add this to the Connects group. So I'm super happy about that. So nonprofit organizations are social enterprises set up for public good, right? It is your responsibility if you set up a nonprofit organization to do something that improves human beings, the animals, or the environment in our world to make the world a better place. Nonprofit organizations are kind of special in that regard. And since there's a couple of people that I'm going to ask you once more time, if there's things that you have in mind right now, a purpose, a mission, an idea to make the world a better place, even if it's not all thought out. I'm not asking for a business plan, but if you have something that you want to share about what you're trying to do today, then I can kind of leave it in. So can you please restate shorter what your mission is?
Yeah, partner with nonprofits to build the isolated talented family.
Okay, I love it. That's awesome. Very, very good. Anybody else? What's your idea? How are you going to save the planet? I mean, the world is burning, among other things. Like, really? Come on. No one else wants to share? Okay, share your idea. Yeah, don't admit.
Professionalism is really positive for childcare.
Say that again at the beginning.
I want to professionalize early childcare.
Professionalize early childcare. Oh, you and Elizabeth Warren. You should go talk to her. Exactly. Yeah, I know, right? She's so great. Okay, now I'm giving way too much. Anyways, if you do, anybody else want to share? No pressure. Okay. You can tell me later. It's all good. If you do go through that process and make yourself a nonprofit organization, yay you'll be joining 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the United States of America. The global number is actually more than 4 times that amount. It's pretty cool. There's actually 50 nonprofit organizations per zip code. In this city, in this zip code, there's a lot more than in the middle of Iowa, right? So kind of imagine that process. But it's good to think about the scale. And just for comparison, I mean, yes, walk down Forbes, there's a million different for-profit corporations, Chipotle, Pamela's, whatever, all the things. But there's only 4,300 domestic corporations that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So I know that that's only the big corps, but still we're a player in nonprofits. We have a lot to do. And it's more than just the numbers of corporations that we are. It actually has a lot to do with the people who are dedicating their lives. Actually, I just heard a guy over there trying to make the planet a better place to live, which is exactly what nonprofit people who work in the nonprofit industry have. Does anyone want to guess what the percentage of people who work in nonprofits is in the US? Guess? Any number? You can't guess. Somebody else guess. But you don't even know? Come on, give me a number. I have chocolate and Skittles. 10. 10%. Oh, did you cheat? You said that. You cheated. No. Skittles or chocolate? Oh, Skittles. Yes, there's 10%, 13 million jobs. Get your applications out, people. Nonprofits are hiring all the time, and you're like thinking, oh, the pay shit. Maybe, but your heart's gonna be big, and there's lots of ways to grow. And yes, nonprofits make money. Hence the name of our crazy little thing. We're talking about nonprofits and financing today. You might have thought this is a misnomer. It's not. We'll talk a lot more about that in a moment, but pretty cool. And even cooler than that, 11 million people, 11 million people volunteer every single day for nonprofits. I'm one of them. I'm volunteering today. I'm an alumni of the Credit Union Association. Here I am. I'm not getting paid to do this. And that kind of works itself out to be about 52 hours per year per person. Is anyone on par? It's the end of October. Is anyone close? Come on. You guys volunteer at all? Who volunteers? Steve. Yes, Steve. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Steve. Oh yeah, chocolate for my volunteers. Or yeah, pass it along, pass it along. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And why that's important, if you're thinking about starting a nonprofit organization or kind of playing in the social sector, is because that group of people right there, that will be the difference between your fast growth and not, your ability to sustain and not, your ability to get donors and not. Those are the people more than even the people who actually work for you. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time about the landscape. I'm not going to go into the landscape of all the types of corporations and nonprofit corporations, but I did want to address a couple of them. Who's heard of a B-Corp? Yeah, you guys love that. See, I don't really have to do anything. Benefit corporation, as you know, these corporations are taxable. They have to pay taxes. They have they're a for-profit company. They have shareholders. They are responsible to actually producing an income. They actually have to do that. And then they also are responsible of their own choosing, because they're a B Corp, to provide some sort of public mission as well. So they have sort of two categories of areas of focus. How do they hold themselves accountable to that area of sustainability or economic benefit in terms of the benefit to the public trust, the good of the humanity? That's kind of really on their own. No one really holds them to their feet besides the shareholders, right? And that can be pretty loud voice. Open up social media and people can be pretty upset about those things. So it does matter. Does anyone have an example of a B Corp? Patagonia, yes. She's cheating. Anyway, Patagonia is a great example. So Patagonia actually gave 1% of all of their profits to an enterprise. They're specifically focused on the environment. So organizations that focus on building a safer environment and more healthy planet for us all. And then in 2002, the owner was like, this is not enough. The needle is not moving. And so he actually sold and transferred all of the assets of his company into a trust and gave that trust to the nonprofit organization that's actually running it for climate good right now, $100 million a year. From everything that Patagonia still does, your jackets, etc., going for that good. Anybody, any other ideas? Anybody heard of anything else? Ben & Jerry's. Oh yeah, we know it's so good. Allbirds. Great examples of some amazing B Corps. I just want to point out really cool for Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's has this, they call it their triple focus, which is people, profits, and planet. It's super adorable. They're incredibly successful. They actually ended up selling their corporation to Unilever. Sad, but they were able to, in that negotiation of that deal, they were able to keep their board. And so their board is actually able to move their, and direct their assets in a way that helps them maintain their B Corp kind of philosophy, even though they're technically actually not a B Corp anymore. But Allbirds is a B Corp. You want to know some more? I actually wrote a few down. I can't remember all of them. That's the only two thing I know. Let's see. Coursera. You guys do Coursera? Oh, I know. Who knows? Athleta. Tom's Shoes. Don't actually want to, but a lot of people do. Pretty cool. Anyway, we kind of understand how B Corps work, right? There's also S Corps. Do we know S Corps? Ish. So this is not the formal name. I like to think of S Corps as startup corporations. It's not really how it is. They're similar to an LLC. So you can set up an S corporation and it's really allowing you to do pass-through money, right? So as I told you, B Corps are taxed on their income. Sometimes they get different tax brackets based on how they might be using their money. S Corps pass through. So let's say you and I, what's your name? Ariel and I make this company to help educators become more professional for early childhood, right? That's fantastic. We have zero money. You have no money, I have no money. How are we going to do this? So we can set up an S Corp, and any of the dividends from our corporation that we're trying to build up would then be taxable on our personal accounts, just like an LLC is, right? And so that in that way, you can actually reserve some of the cash that might normally have to be paid for taxes because you're a corporation, C Corp, B Corp, etc. And you can put that back into the growing of your corporation. This is a perfect startup way for nonprofits to start. A lot of nonprofits start up this way. A lot of C-Corps start up this way. It's a pass-through essentially that allows you to do that. A lot of S Corps are there for public good though, and they continue to maintain a mission for public good. The one that I know of that's most successful is this amazing coffee company out in California. And they set it up with 2 owners, and then they moved and they had a bunch more people that got excited about it. So there's a limit to the people who can own our company. That's 100 in an S Corp. Once you get more than 100, you got to kind of move into a different place, which is what this coffee company did. Nestle decided to become a big owner, and now they're C Corp. But nonetheless, pretty cool.
Is that a blue bottle?
Yeah, blue bottle. Yeah. See, like, oh, she's so good. All right, so then of course, nonprofits, we're here to talk about a lot of nonprofit stuff today, social enterprises, for-purpose organizations, which is actually how most of us prefer to think about it, because they actually do make a profit. Has nothing about a not-for-profit, has about some things to do about non-taxes. Non-profit corporations are corporations. They have a board of directors. There is no owner. They don't pay taxes. Sometimes they pay small taxes, but not major taxes. Right? So that's kind of the difference. What is the biggest nonprofit in the United States of America? Anybody know? Categorically even? Where's my chocolate? Yeah, I'm oh, let's get over. Yeah. Absolutely. Lutheran Services of America. $26 billion is their net worth. That's a pretty cool company. Actually, they do a lot of really amazing things that nobody else in the world wants to do. I know. Who knew? Anybody want to take a guess at Carnegie Mellon University? Nonprofit organization. What's the number? Do you know? No. What is it? Give me a number. 600 million? Anybody else?
1 billion?
1.8 billion. Boom. And I know you're like, oh God, my tuition. But you know what? I mean, it's first of all, most of their money is actually not coming from that. But nonetheless, they're reinvesting it because they have to, because it's a nonprofit organization. You know, Farnham is not doing that. You can look up Farnham's salary. I did just the other day, actually. And Jared's salary too. All that's public. So they're not banking on this, that you were banking on this. This is working for you. That's working for you. I want to do a foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Anybody? Number? Come on. We're from Carnegie Mellon, people. Give me some numbers.
Yeah, 50 billion.
You knew that. Okay. Yeah. He's like, I want to get some of that. I know. Yeah. Come on. Come on, Melinda. She's giving out plenty of money, not to worry. All right. So that's kind of an interesting way to think about just sort of the scale and the scope. So nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations have a couple of things in common. One is that they both have a defined function, things that they actually are set up to do. Nonprofit organizations have a function, and it's very specifically listed as why we exist. And this is good for you. Yep, take notes, or you can have the slide deck later. And what we do. That's what your mission is. So I'm going to read off a couple missions, and you're going to guess. It could be a for-profit or a nonprofit organization. I'll be nice and start off with nothing. Address children's unique needs, giving them a healthy start in life, the opportunity to learn, and protection from harm. Anybody? Okay, is it for-profit or nonprofit? Nonprofit, Save the Children. Number 2, providing the best user experience through innovative hardware, software, and services. Profit or no profit? Profit, anybody? Company? Apple. Okay. To conserve nature and reduce the most pressing threats to the diversity of life on Earth. Profit or nonprofit? Nonprofit or wildlife fund. Pretty cool. Oh, this will be fun. To be the world's favorite travel company. Myriad. I know it probably is Expedia's too. Everyone has the same. Okay, I'm going to give you a really easy one. Are you ready? Are you paying attention over here in the corner? To create a transformative educational experience for students, focus on deep disciplinary knowledge, problem solving, leadership, communication, entrepreneurship. Exactly. That's awesome. So let's just talk a little bit about the next thing that nonprofits and for-profits have in common, which is their form, how they are actually functioning, their structure. You might think of it as their governance or operational models, org charts, things of that nature. Today, I'm gonna spend all my time talking about nonprofits because that's what I'm here for, and that's what I know really well. So let's go ahead and do this. So nonprofit organizations have about 6 major categories. You can be charitable, which most nonprofits are. You can, let's see if I can do this way. Can I do it? Religious, the biggest, that actually takes up the largest amount of nonprofit organizations in the United States today, although that's shrinking quite a bit of late. Public universities and some private. Private foundations, like we just talked about a moment ago. Political organizations, you probably knew that. And then there's this massive category, which is a little bit ridiculous, but it's like, think of it as associations and federal credit unions and a big category underneath that. In these categories of 6 is the way that we kind of think about nonprofit organizations as a whole. But I keep sort of mentioning this idea about taxes and how that affects the finance. There are 20 tax identified specific categories of nonprofit organizations brought to you by the IRS. Thank you, IRS. No, thank you. Actually, it's a total disaster most of the time. Most organizations, do you guys think that most nonprofits are C3s? Do you know what a C3 is? C3 is public charity. County owns a C3. It's set up for public benefit, education, etc. But there is, as I said, 20, and not everybody's a C3, even though so many people I know write down that they're a C3 and they're just not. Did I write it down? I didn't. I don't have a slide for that. Let's talk about this. How about your local sorority and fraternity? Are they a C3? Are they nonprofit? Yeah, they're nonprofit. Are you in one? I'm not judging. I just was trying to like see if you knew that. It's all good. So fraternities and sororities, C7s. My pickleball club in my hometown, I set it up as a C7. It's a social club. They have a unique characteristic in that although I can donate to you, my pickleball club, your fraternity, etc. I, as a donor, don't get to write that off on my taxes because they're getting money in other ways, right? And that's the same way as some other things. So I'm starting to get at some complexities regarding the structure regarding money. Are you following me? Okay. Just for fun, there is like the Steelworkers Union, C5s. The Highmark Employee Beneficiary Association, C9s. Shadyside Hospital is actually a 501(e) corporation. So these are all tax exempt corporations filed under nonprofit corporation, but the way that they are benefiting from their tax exempt status is based on their IRS category. And you, when you set up your corporation, can choose to write your mission. The words matter a lot to the IRS, as it turns out. Write your mission and write your purpose in a way that makes the IRS categorize you in one way or another. And so it really matters how you do it. You can't just willy-nilly go on, say, I'm gonna go mission, hard, all the things, and then expect your form to be able to support you because there's a lot of technicalities that go along with forming that. Now you're like, oh crap, I think I'll just make a corporation, I know. All right, let's move on and talk about ownership. So I mentioned a moment ago that that nonprofit organizations do not have owners. They are organized for public trust. Does anyone own water? The Allegheny River? No. And they know what they call that actually? The commons. Does anyone own the internet? No. Public commons, so cool. Similarly, nonprofits are set up so that it's public trust, right? So there really are no owners. You are set up and the mission is who owns you. The mission owns you. So we're going to try, so all of the teachers who are going to become professionals who are going to have a different way of organizing themselves and be able to set up unions, etc. They now, that is the owner. That is the owner. There are no owners. So you're like, okay, that's interesting. Talk to me a little bit more about this. So if there's no ownership, then how the heck does work get done? Who like makes the decisions? Who cuts the deals? Who does whatever? So that happens at the control and governance. Think of staff, think of boards, board of directors, board of trustees, board of advisors, whatever board you want to call it, or you call it a board. You all should highly recommend spending some time getting on a board. It's not that hard. I can help you do it, and you will learn a ton by serving on a board. See, Leah's shaking her head over there, shaking her head over there. It's totally true. Okay, so the board does everything, but they don't own it. So then there's this thing called fiduciary responsibility, which you might think, oh, fiduciary money, they own it. Remember, it's not the money, it's not about the money, it's about the mission. So who's responsible for the money is the board of directors and your C-suite staff, or your executive director, whoever you have. Interesting thing about the money, as a fiduciary, because you're a board member or a founder or a staff member, you may be held liable for the corporation's decision. So let's pick some nasty examples. There were about 47 to 50 corporations that started up as a result of COVID that were not spending money on COVID. They were not helping you get your groceries or do anything else, and somebody found them out because you have to report your information to the IRS. You can maintain your tax exempt status, and as it turns out, those jet skis don't actually help people with COVID. And so then you can go to jail, like a lot of time in jail. Same thing, a lot of that times happens with disasters. Katrina was terrible. I'm telling you all the bad stuff. You can look this stuff up on Charity Watch, it's super interesting. Let's see, veterans organizations, terrible. Be very wary of all veterans organizations. I know that's terrible, but be wary. There's a lot that take advantage. Same thing with what wars like when Ukraine broke out, when Gaza broke out. Be wary. There's people out there with nefarious ideas, and don't even get me started on that. So you can be responsible. So if you serve on that board, it's not my idea, I don't own it, it's the mission, it's for the veterans. But yeah, you were responsible for the budget sheet, so you can go to jail over that, which is why we take out directors and officers for sure. Cover ourselves. Compensation. So, okay, you said that this was about nonprofits. Now you're telling me that nonprofits are for purpose. Now you're telling me I don't have an owner, but money, like anybody, hello? Yes, there is compensation. You can compensate the board as a nonprofit organization. You can compensate the employees as a nonprofit organization. You can make money, and you can absolutely do that. Now, there are no golden umbrellas, and you can't just like pay somebody a ridiculous amount, because I'm gonna look it up. I can see how much farmer makes. You and I can do this right now. We can see how much they make. And you can compare that to the overall assets of the corporation and decide for yourself whether or not they're managing money well. But yes, you can be compensated, and people do, not to worry. It's my idea. My AI for social good is my thing. Come on, nobody else is doing this right now. Because actually I'm doing a seminar on this, and there's not a lot of people doing this. So I want to own that. Yes, you can. So you protect that. As a founder, you can protect your idea under intellectual property rules and rights. And still, and you just did this, you not just, but you did this. Pass your idea and what your intellectual property benefit is off to a nonprofit, and still be the owner of that intellectual property. So in case you're like, I'm giving my idea away, no thanks, and there's no owner, no thanks, like all this sounds terrible and it's ridiculous, I gotta get a board, like whatever, but you can still be responsible for that. I worked for a guy who was a musician, and he wrote a bunch of songs, and he wanted to do a nonprofit startup to, it's a cool white guy, and he had a black guy, and they both were playing guitar, and they wanted to go show kids that white kids and black kids can be together in Massachusetts. And he's like, but my songs are my songs. I need to make money from those. That's how I like pay the bills. No problem. We put that in a separate kind of way in managing this intellectual property, and then we set up the nonprofit to be able to work for the benefit of the mission. Make sense? I talk fast. Are we cool? Okay, good. What you're ultimately trying to get to is this really cool utopia, which is mission stewardship, which basically means you, the owner, you, the donor, you, the volunteer, and everyone else who cares about this at any moment in time are stewarding the mission. And when that happens, like all of a sudden, all the things come into play, right? Pretty cool. So that's what we're trying to get to is mission stewardship. All right. Let's talk about this. So, all right, there's a bunch of forms. I have to decide that. There's a bunch of ways that I can function. I have to decide my mission. So is this really working for nonprofit organizations? Because this sounds complicated. This is hard. How do I do this? Yes, actually, over time, it has been working for nonprofit organizations. As a matter of fact, revenue for nonprofit organizations as a whole is up 40% in the past 10 years. That's a good number to look at 10 years, because 5 years ago, kind of a mess. So we'll look at 10. And as it turns out, for-profit organizations have that same growth. Did you hear what I said? Amazing. One thing that I love about nonprofits is our compounded annual growth rate, our CAGR, is 6%. For profits, 4.7 in the same period of time, 10 years, right? So what this tells you is that, whoa, social good kind of matters, and it does. The government is spending 80 cents to $1 on nonprofit income that they give to, all of nonprofit income comes either the majority from government or from fee for service. And that's 80, that accounts for 80 cents of every dollar that's going into it, right? And so there's a lot of people, and you know why? The government doesn't actually want to do this work. It's hard to set up AI for nonprofits. It's hard to get educators to be, you know, having the same status as teachers. It is difficult work. So somebody else go do it, and I'll be nice to you and not make you pay all those taxes. You can buy candy without paying taxes on it. Did you get some? Anyway, so that's pretty cool, and I like thinking about this, but I think what's important here is that your form, your structure, really matters in terms of your ability to actually achieve function efficiently and effectively. And that's where actually I spend most of my time helping organizations do that. So, and this is my design coming out. Are you any of you guys designers? No, form helps function. It's so cute. My professors will be very happy with me right now. All right. Okay, let's go and talk about the life cycle of nonprofits. Time, success. You with me? I have this great idea. It's so cool. Everyone's into it. Everyone's going to spend some money. Did you know there's about 140,000 nonprofits started every single year? Pretty cool. Great. Call all your friends, put it all over social media, make a mess, do all sorts of things, get into good trouble, grow. Happens all the time. First 2 years are so fun. Hard work was so fun. Sort of like a startup for a for-profit company, not something like that. Actually, this very chart I'm used for products. But then you get into this growth phase, and that's pretty cool. And now you got a staff and an org chart, and you got owners, and everything good. Well, not owners, but board. Let's call it that. Then you get the maturity phase, and that's okay, sort of interesting. I'm moving along. I got 2 people to do some AI for Feeding America. But you know, it'd be great if I had 10, but whatever. I'm still doing one business at a time, kind of working it. You can stay here for decades. For absolute decades. United Way, 135 years old. 135 years old. The oldest nonprofit in the United States is actually 376 years old. Started in Boston. Very strange, but nonetheless, you can live here for a long time. I wish that this chart had this cool line right here. Dying to do this. Goes up into the air. Utopia. We met our goal. We did the thing. Teachers are now, the educators are now teachers. Boom, check done. Move on. Never happens. You know why? Because boards sit around and they go, oh, we have all the teachers in the US who now are certified. Let's go to Europe. And all of a sudden, you know, because we have some, we have assets, whatever. Maybe one day, I would like to see more nonprofits actually work themselves out. They all talk about it, but nobody ever does it. Nonetheless, we do have decline. About 12,000 nonprofit organizations decline or go out of business every single year. And so, I know, right? But now we have a delta. Oh, you got a question?
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, you know, like for instance, you know, if a nonprofit was founded to like eliminate smallpox,
Yeah.
and then they do.
Yeah.
But they still want to exist, so they find another disease.
Right? I know, it's not that hard, actually.
Yeah.
They just change your mission statement to all favors. Yeah, exactly. Or they scope creep it, is what I find. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Good? Okay. So anyway, so there's a big gap. So the good news is there's a lot of, and that sort of helps our CAGR number, right? Because we got a lot more people coming in and doing stuff and problems get solved, and isn't that great? But oh my gosh, it just kills me. The fact that there are so many organizations who, if we looked at their missions, remember I was reading off the missions? I could read off missions to you, and I have gone into board meetings with doing this very same thing and reading off missions for different corporations in the room, nonprofits, and it's no different. You can't tell the difference. And some of them are fighting for the same money in like neighboring zip codes. It's so stupid. It's just absolutely ridiculous to me that we don't spend a little bit more time thinking about what our neighbors are. So if you're going to start one, please look around you at the very least. But why there's that cool little thing in the middle, that little arrow, is because what happens with nonprofit organizations, in order for them to sustain before they decline, we're certainly not going to do this, is they hit what we call a turnaround event. You can actually cause a turnaround event to happen, or one happens to you. Like for instance, COVID caused many nonprofits to have a turnaround because they got a ton of money to go do stuff. So did some for-profit companies, Moderna, and others, right? So that kind of thing can happen. Same thing, a turnaround event, we can have a policy change. So the American Healthcare Workers Act, something along that lines, I probably don't have the exact name. Anyways, that's literally changing policy so that healthcare workers act differently in states. And that's turning around some nonprofits who spend time in the space, like a law, totally sets them back into their time frame so they can kind of restart the clock. You know what the biggest and most famous one is? Let's see, ice. Anybody? Do you guys not pour ice over your heads as the ice bucket challenge?
Oh, yeah, right.
$117 million, boom, right into the AMS Association of America. So cool. They wish they could have replicated that. That wasn't even them, it just sort of happened, but that was a massive turnaround event for them. So they literally got to set back and kind of restructure themselves going forward. And that doesn't happen very often. It's hard to actually do that. It's even harder to cause it. And I'm giving examples of natural things that happen. You also can't predict that. You don't know when it's gonna hit. You might not be ready for it. Like if all of a sudden the government was like, oh, we want you to go and feed these people because they literally can't leave because of flood. And you're like, but I only have 12 meals. Like, not gonna work for you, right? So you have to be prepared for those types of things, a little bit tricky, but nonetheless, the way you can cause it to happen more specifically to gain scale is to actually find partners and merge. So talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about money, shall we? I know, we've been dancing around this a little bit. Anybody, since I'm in the numbers game today, anybody want to guess the amount that nonprofits contribute to the overall economy? Anybody? Throw it out. Come on. Million. Show me a number.
10 trillion.
10 trillion. Okay. All right. That's a number. We can do that. Maybe a little less than that. A little less. Anybody else? Mm-hmm. 1.4 trillion. Whoa, see, I mean, you were being obnoxious, but I was, and actually you messed me up because you said 14, I'm like, wait, I think it's 1.4, but then we started. Anyways, pretty cool. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And very specifically, and I think what more I wanted to talk about was the fact that we contribute 5.6% to the GDP. So what sector do you think contributes the most to GDP? Category.
Okay.
Professional services. Thank you, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG. Get out your resumes. I know, so disgusting. I know. God, consultants, I am one, it's terrible. 13%, I'm not contributing that much, that's for sure. 13% manufacturing, if they're the top at 13%, what do you think manufacturing is? Percentage wise, give me numbers, under 13, it's above 5.6. 11, I know. 7, who's 7? No one's at 7, actually. Let's talk about our peaks. Who's around us? Because this, I think, is going to surprise you. So we're at 5.6, 6% retail trade, Amazon. I know, right? I know. Information. In the whole category of information. Thank you, Google. 6%. Crazy. 4%, just barely underneath where we are. Arts and entertainment. Netflix, Hulu. Really? Really? Heck yeah. Construction, 4%. Sort of makes sense, actually. Nonetheless, I think it's pretty cool. So this is here mostly to give you some sort of construct of scale, but also to help you understand, again, back to that point about making money, is that there's a lot of money being made. And it doesn't, just because it's going back for social good, thank God, you know, let's do more of that. Instead of going into the pockets of the shareholders. So that sounds good, Kim. I want to be part of that contribution. How do I do that? How do I make that money grow? So rainmaking mostly comes from philanthropy. Philanthropy contributes about $500 billion to the nonprofit sector on an annual basis. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. However, the philanthropic giving, because you can see those categories up on the screen there, is actually on the decline. The only thing that's on the upcline is what we call bequests. So thank you, Giving Pledge. You guys heard of this? Look it up, write it down right now. Go find out who's on the Giving Pledge and what they're doing and what they're giving their money to. That matters a lot. It's not on the Cummings family yet. 2 weeks ago, it was absolutely fantastic.
But for the most part, philanthropic giving is not doing great at this very moment, but it's still up there. It's still a big part of what many organizations do. And great. The next part that's also great, and we talked about it a little bit, is federal and state grants. So this is another reason why, as you start to build your nonprofit, you want to think about what money is coming. Remember I told you about that 80 cents on a dollar thing? That was fee for service stuff, but also coming from government. The government actually, and this I think might be of interest to you as well, contributed $11.6 billion to R&D to nonprofits last year. R&D, yeah, nonprofits do tech, and yeah, the government wants us to do that, so absolutely, that's a really good number. Health and Human Services, 36 million. There's money being spent for us to do work, like roll up your sleeves and get some work done. You can get it state level. I just wanted to point out, really cool thing about Pennsylvania. It's an incredibly philanthropic state, maybe not as great as Massachusetts, but nonetheless, pretty great. And they are giving up to $1 million per nonprofit right now to solve environmental problems. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to go solve some problems. So go talk to your state. And this is why voting down the ticket matters. Okay, I'll get off that box. Services, you can literally charge. So I belong to a thing called the Boston Club, and I pay some money, and that's membership money, right? You can write little notebooks, you can write a book, you can sell things, you can do things related to your mission and charge for it. People sell for certain people do services that way as well. Many I think of your healthcare organizations that you're absolutely paying to go do that work. So you can make money that way. UBI, unrelated business income. So this is like when Carnegie Mellon sells sweatshirts, right? I know, and it's pretty crazy. And just because I was so curious, because that's one of my characteristic strengths, as I found out a couple of years ago. Do you know how much Carnegie Mellon makes in unrelated business income every single year? It's not just t-shirts. They also own a lot of property and they rent it out, et cetera, all the things. Anyone want to guess since we're in the numbers today? Green shirt, you owe me a number. Give me a number. Unrelated business income, Carnegie Mellon last year. 14 million, sorry, 14 million in unrelated business income from Carnegie Mellon alone. So bad news, they gotta pay taxes on that. Not maybe the big amount of taxes as before. That doesn't mean they're not making money on it, because you absolutely can bet they're making money on the hats that I buy, right? So it absolutely is a way to make money, but it's not your only way to make money. So when you're like, oh, I know, I have this great idea. I want to go and do and for my nonprofit, I want to have a gala and I want to have a raffle. Those are unrelated business income. You're not a raffle company. You don't actually do that. You're going to pay taxes on some of that stuff, or maybe they can't write it off. Depending on your structure, it's complicated. Just know that it's a little bit unique in terms of how money can come in. Also, investments, which is another thing I don't think a lot of folks really think about, but nonprofits invest money. Think of that $50 billion that Melinda and Bill Gates have in their foundation. That's sitting in a bank, baby. And some of that money is because it was in a bank and it raised money. You can absolutely do that. Foundations actually have requirements to spend a certain amount of their money every single year. Some other organizations choose to. They write it in their bylaws or governing documents about how to do that. But you can absolutely make money from investments and repurpose that into your mission. So I thought it might be cool to look at actually a chart like this. Have you guys seen a 990 or a P&L like this? Okay, this is Charity Water, one of my favorite organizations. They're a really big, beautiful example. $85 million organization. That's down here. You with me? So now let's go to this top category where it's this whole part about revenue. You guys are like, is this math class? The counting, I'm done with the counting. I just wanted to show the mix of Charity Water's revenue. They've got a pretty good mix, but as you can see, 65% individuals. So if I was on their board, I would be asking them to make that number smaller. We need to grow some of those other pie pieces, particularly if 4%, I don't care about the 4%. The 21% is foundations, and I know that foundations are still giving a lot of money. That's great. Also, where are my state and federal grants? Come on, y'all. I mean, I know we're in Africa, but let's go do our stuff. So, but nonetheless, this is an incredibly healthy organization. They've been around less than 20 years. They have $130 million in the bank. Totally amazing. Highly recommend looking up to it. But the point is diversity, right? Which brings me to, okay, that sounds great, Kim. That's a lot of money. And we've been talking like in the trillions of dollars. I've got like 10 cents in my pocket. No 30 cents. Let's change that. $10 in my pocket. You know what I mean? How am I going to actually get my organization to grow? So I just wanted to give you some perspective
on the size of nonprofit organizations. So those organizations that we were rattling off a moment ago, well, Charity Water, definitely one of them. Another organization, Ford Ocean, the Pittsburgh Symphony, 30 million, Southwestern United Way of Pennsylvania, I actually have to merge 3 organizations, 36 million, Carnegie Mellon, 1.8 billion. They're in the 1% of all nonprofit organizations. So when you think of a nonprofit organization, you're probably thinking of a 1%. There's not that many. They just have a lot of money to do a lot more things. Let's go down. Between 1 million and 5 million organizations, these are like your boys and girls clubs. So these are often what we would call, getting complicated, but federated organizations that have big brands and then have small, separate organizations that actually run themselves locally. So that's a fair amount, 7%, it's a pretty big number. Then let's go down to the 500,000 to $1 million, 500,000 to $1 million. So it's a pretty small number in that area. But there's a lot in here. You'll probably know a lot of them. They're your community banks, they're homeless shelters. They're the, I looked it up, Three Rivers Waterkeeper, $468,000. By the way, the rivers look absolutely amazing, in my personal opinion, so pretty cool. Let's get to a bigger category, shall we? 50,000 to $499. This is, or did I mess that up? 50,000, $499. Your Three Rivers was 468. Yeah, 468. So that which I just said, Three Rivers and your homeless shelters are in this category. That's why there's a lot on. That other category up above that is actually community colleges. A lot of community colleges, like the Community College in Philadelphia, they're at 760 million. So the things that I was just telling you about, 50K to 1 million, are the things you probably know about. Your kind of local, statewide organizations. Then, oh my God, 70% of all nonprofits are under 50,000. And if we change that number, we would still be in the 50%. If we went to 30,000, we would still be 50%. So nonprofit organizations are pretty tiny. Yeah.
This is actually like mind-boggling. I didn't realize it's for any of those of you who want to start a nonprofit. So 412 Food Rescue, which I started, like in 2 years, we were in the top 7%. And this year we're going to break the 1%.
It's crazy. I know, right? US.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I ask, is it okay if I ask?
Yes.
What tier you typically engage with most as a firm?
Me personally.
Yeah, like what is McCormick or? Where is?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. So remember I told you how I do startups?
Yeah.
So I literally started the Korean Associations of Lexington 4 months ago. We just became a nonprofit. So they had $1,000 in their bank, $1,000. Now they're gonna make some money. They're gonna be fine. They're probably gonna still be under 50,000 when they grow. And then I mentioned it before, but I do a lot of work with ALS Association. They're in the top 1%. So I would say 75% of the organizations I work with are in the top 1%. But I also I dabble quite a bit in the lower level too.
Yeah.
But mostly for startup purposes or for major restructuring.
Thank you.
Yep, good question. All right, let's see. So that sounds good. Now that I know that I'm not going to be blown out of the water and I don't have to have $1 trillion to run a nonprofit, how do I get my startup funding? Good question. First and foremost, to the chart that I showed you earlier, we've got to have some diversity. Not only just diversity in the types of funding that we have, but diversity in physically where we are, physically who's on our board, physically who we look like, word-wise what we say. You got to be pretty diverse because you're trying to capture the people who might have also the same idea as you. And you imagine this, if you were to go to the CUC right now and sit down and say, I want to talk about the whales. How many people do you think would come and sit with you? Some, right? Some, but not the whole campus, probably not even your whole classroom. So think about that now on scale of the United States or the whole worldwide. So you've got to be pretty diverse to catch all those people. They're not just going to come to you just because you all love the whales. They're just not. Social media aside. So how do I get my money? First is your board. You're right. You start a nonprofit, you have to have a board. And so your board can help give you money or they can help you find money. So that is a great way to think about your startup money. We already talked about grants from federal organizations, state organizations. You can also crowdfund. I have to pay taxes on it, but you can absolutely crowdfund for your idea. And a lot of people do that. Partnerships, my favorite, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment. There's incubators for nonprofit organizations that help you start up. So there's this organization called Luna. There's one Octane. Echoing Green, I've never heard of them, but I had actually, a friend of mine actually done some work with them recently. So there's organizations that have set aside money generally from foundations that will help organizations
particularly a startup or in their growth phase of nonprofit. So that's pretty cool. You can take out a loan. You absolutely can. And link at the bread bank first, and they might not give you a deal, but you can absolutely do it. Microloans are incredibly popular here. Oh, also, I wrote there, as a reminder, there's also fiscal sponsors. So it takes a little while sometimes to get your classification from the IRS that you're gonna be a C3 nonprofit tax exempt corporation, so I don't have to pay taxes. But I have this great grant and I wanna go for it. That's cool. So if you're gonna try to do something for AI, there's already several organizations that are nonprofits who are C3s doing AI work. And while you're trying to figure out your gig, you could be like, hey, I'm gonna do this and we're gonna, work together and whatnot, but can you be my fiscal agent? Cause I wanna go after this one grant. And they'll be like, yeah, how about you give us some of that money? And you're like, oh, done. And that's a fiscal agent. Happens all the time, particularly for startups. I worked with a organization that was doing care for people who had been abused in northern Colorado, and they were separating themselves from a hospital, and this is exactly how they got their startup money. Pretty cool. And then earned income. You can sell stuff. Remember we talked about that? You might have to pay taxes on it, but you can do it. I would be remiss, I'm almost done, if I didn't talk to you about the pressures, and I just wanted to just be clear that it's not all rosy, and it's important for you to take stock in what's actually happening. The forward du jour is money. Every nonprofit's looking for money right now. That's particularly because there's only so much philanthropic money floating around. It never changes more than the economic the economy as a whole, so it never grows more than that. So therefore, if a bunch of money is going to tax, and a bunch of money is going to Ukraine, and a bunch of money is going to Gaza, it's just being squeezed out of somebody else. That's all that's really happening with the philanthropic dollar. So that's why there's a lot of pressure there. Nonprofits have impact pressures. So to that point of leaders saying, hey, I want you to feed more kids or save more whales or clean more water. We've got to show impact. It's really difficult to show that and to meet the demands in that way. Talent. It's hard to convince you young people to go do good stuff for nonprofit organizations. So they are suffering as a whole. They need more and more people, particularly with tech skills, but also others. And then speed. We have the patience of a small gnat these days. Everybody does. So if you were a donor and you're like, oh, someone told me about that charity thing. That website could fly, man, or you're not going to get your 10 bucks. You're just not. And that's where some tech actually comes into play. And nonprofits are not great at setting aside money for tech. So how do I keep my organization alive? How do I sustain it? That's all about capacity building. And so really quickly, I just wanted to make sure that we mention that it's very important to think about the fact that you cannot do this alone. These are all learned things from for-profit organizations that nonprofit organizations are not very good at, actually. You can't do this alone. You literally cannot. You need to go talk to somebody. And even if it's just your friends or whatever, but you have to have donors. But even more than that, corporations, financially stable corporations that are for-profit organizations or the government or other nonprofits. It's too expensive to own everything. A lot of nonprofits actually farm a lot of their stuff out, and that's important. In order for me to actually move the needle on the mission that I have, I need more resources behind it. And that's something that nonprofits are not very good at all. Again, like I said before, they're happy with just like, oh, this little tiny bit that we're doing, this little tiny bit. And then finally, is regarding competition. And that's that example that I gave you before, where there's so many nonprofit organizations out right now doing the same thing, asking for the same money, and wondering why they don't have all the money in the world to do what they need to do. So let's talk about partnerships really quick, and then I'm done. So how do we do a partnership? It can be complicated, but the first thing you need to do is get your story straight, your mission, your function, what you're trying to do, and then you go find people who might be interested in that same thing. Charity Water, their major partner is Google. That's half the reason that they're where they are today. And Google didn't come to them. They went to Google. They're like, hey, we want to give water to the planet. All right, let's figure out how to do that with technology, et cetera, otherwise. Public-private partnerships are an increasingly popular way for nonprofit organizations to make progress on their mission. So this might mean you go to talk with Elizabeth Moore, and then you go to talk to the teachers union, and then you have your little nonprofit, and then boom, you've got a public-private partnership that can really move the needle on your mission. Pretty cool. Another thing that we can do is we can share services. A lot of nonprofits do this, and I set up a lot of deals this way, where it's just like, okay, I really just want to focus on, I don't know why I'm focused on the whales today, focus on saving the whales.
I can't deal with anything else. I don't wanna do HR, I don't wanna do payroll, I don't wanna do any of that. I don't wanna do anything that has to do with numbers. So you're gonna farm that out with another organization that maybe has that capability, like a Sierra Club or something that has similar mission, shared services, happens all the time. And then there's mergers. There's a lot of great examples of nonprofit mergers. They're not like for-profit mergers. They're a lot different. There's no payout, there's no golden umbrella, but I have never known a nonprofit merger to not do well, unless it was tanked by the people who were actually running the organization. So, very, very, very great. The numbers that I have regarding, mergers is in 1 to 3 years after you merge, not only does your volunteerism increase in some cases fourfold, which is pretty amazing, but also you can actually see 12% efficiency with that. And again, that goes back to that kind of overlapping thing, right? Well, if you're doing that AI thing and somebody over in California is doing it, put like the resources together. So all that you're really trying to do as you move through your life cycle of creating your nonprofit, which I hope you all do, is decide for yourself, am I in the right form to be able to do the function that I want to do? And I just thought this bonsai tree, are you guys getting my whole thing? It's so blended. I know, right? I know, but it just so works with everything. I didn't really bring it up, but it so works. And that is the question you should ask yourself all the time. All the time. Because what we're really trying to do is plant a seed under whose shade we may not actually ever sit, but when we do it, we know we're getting closer to saving the planet.
Thank you.
Questions?
Oh, that's separate.
Yeah, go.
Who is actually checking or auditing the reports that the nonprofits are reporting?
Great. So there's a couple of different audit bodies. So some nonprofits have requirements to actually have an audit committee and do their audits. Some of them choose to do that in their governing documents. They're like, we'll do an audit every 5 years. But you know who really audits nonprofit organizations? ProPublica and you, the donor, because they have to submit a 990. Right, so I have to submit a 990, and whether I have that audit or not is on me, but most organizations of any work actually do have that audited. But just in terms of like the sniff test, that's happening publicly. But when you're talking about actually accounting wise?
Kind of, it
Yeah.
just sounds like there's so much room for not really the right thing to happen under that big umbrella.
Yeah, so that's a responsibility of your board of directors. And almost always an organization of any decent size, even some of those under 50,000, have a board of directors and they have a finance committee. And usually there's somebody on that finance committee who I call them bean counters, who's a bean counter who is responsible for making sure that what happens on the balance sheet and the 990 is actually checked and balanced either with an outside firm or themselves. Yeah, that's why finance people are incredibly beneficial on your nonprofit board, incredibly.
Okay. The second question is the landscape, generally speaking, is for-profit is going to be more competitive rather than collaborative than nonprofit companies? Is that the right assumption?
Between you and me at this table, 100%, because they're trying to get money, right? They're trying to do things. But that said, I have a whole theory, and I've done a lot of work with organizations and nonprofit organizations because they set themselves up to compete all the time, right? So I'm picking on you because you gave me your idea, and you're now like, I don't want to do this. But if that's your idea, right, and somebody else also has that idea because they probably do, even though we don't probably know who they are right now, then you're going to work really hard to determine why you're different, to give your competitive advantage. So now all of a sudden we have the same mission. Our missions, I mean, I guess you could say corporations are their same mission is making money, but sure, we have the same mission and we're literally competing against each other. So I don't know if necessarily a for-profit would necessarily be more competitive. For nonprofits can be pretty dang nasty to each other, actually. Yeah. So yeah.
So a lot of nonprofits, provide a like social good service or whatever, but then they realize that they actually have an advocacy responsibility for the issue, but then they start to run into their C3 status. Is that something you recommend they plan for in advance? I mean, because advocacy organizations can have a nonprofit status, right? It's just not a C3.
So you can, as a C3, you can spend a certain portion of your funds to do advocacy, but it is not enough to move the needle on your topic.
Sure.
And I'm not saying
It's not,
yours,
but it's like
anybody's
like-
topic. Yeah, it's just like nominal. You also can't promote individuals as a nonprofit, as a C3, you cannot give money to individuals, so that ends up affecting a lot of things. So yes, C4s are the ones who can do all of that work, right? So the way that nonprofits do this is a couple of different ways. One is if they know that advocacy is gonna be a big part of what I do, like in your case, it might be, I mean, you need to look at a lot of things. But if that's really the bread and butter of what they're gonna do, then they set themselves up that way. But more likely than not, what organizations do is they partner. So we need an arm, a C3 to have a money-making machine, basically, right? And we need to not have advocacy and all of the work that happens on the Hill tied to all the stuff we're doing, because that alienates donors in many cases. So what C3s often do is they set up a C4, C4s can have C3s, and they can have same boards, literally the same people managing them. Oh, so cool. I would rather do that than create another organization any day. So you can have it like that, or you can be a partner with, like, I work for the National Association of Manufacturers, and they're a C4, and they have 3 C3s underneath them, and that's kind of how they function. So lots of different ways to do that.
Unions which do a lot of political action, but are still.
So interesting.
And is there a big restriction on the amount of overlap or boards, infrastructure? I mean, like, because they can have the same office.
You mean for boards on those
C3s,
two organizations?
Yeah.
So it depends on how your original organization documents are set up. Depends a little bit on state to state. Sometimes they get a little picky, like Colorado for some reason is so bizarre right now. California, New York, it's typical. Delaware doesn't even recognize that nonprofits and for-profits operate differently. Same laws, really cool. Not to say that you should set yourself up, because that sometimes can bite you in your butt, but nonetheless. So yes, going back to that thread is that what were you saying? I got off on Delaware before I got off on Delaware.
Advocacy, C4, C3, or the amount of overlap.
Overlap.
Assets.
Overlap of shared assets. So the directors of both corporations, so you can, but again, we've got the sniff test going on. I'm pointing to you, and I know you were talking about money and numbers, but you've got sniff tests. And often the first thing that goes wrong, if somebody is like, oh, wait a second, you're taking the C3, but the C4 is doing amazing, and it's the same board of directors, WTH. So you can be called out. Now, are those financial repercussions? No, no one's really, you know what I mean? Well, unless someone sues you, which is always financial repercussions. So it's a little dirty, but it's not illegal. How about that? Yeah. I wouldn't even say it's dirty. I mean, that happens a lot. Yeah. And actually, when I work with organizations and set it up that way, I absolutely demand that they have overlap.
Sure.
Not necessarily 100%, although I have set up 3 organizations where literally they have the exact same board.
I have one.
Yeah.
The OpenAI situation.
Yeah.
Can you briefly explain what's happening, whether it's legal to transfer from nonprofit to a for-profit.
OpenAI. So OpenAI is the big.
Yes, the corporation, you mean the corporation, whether it's legal for them to do that or not?
Right.
So I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not gonna like give you a legal opinion on that. But what I do know is at the end of the day, like we were talking on that one slide, it's all about money and intellectual property. So how they decide to move that intellectual property and the money is what's going to determine what they can move into a C3. They can absolutely move some, if not all, of their assets into a corporation from the nonprofit. They can absolutely do some of that. How much of it, how much is taxed, how much, who owns it, those are the discussions that are going to have to take place, right? Think about it in terms of money and ownership.
So there would be some taxes triggered, because we can't set up a C3 as a non-tax
Yeah.
organization,
Oh.
just funnel it on.
No. Yeah.
So from our experience,
Yeah.
in terms of transferring IP to a for-profit, we had to get the state attorney general's
Right.
approval. So because we're transferring the IP from a nonprofit C3 and spinning off for-profit. So that transfer needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
the state.
Right, and the reason that the AG has so much power, and again, up and down the ticket, people, is because these are public trusts. The mission of the nonprofit is a public trust. So in order for me to give it to anybody, and the same thing happens with mergers, actually, in order for assets to be moved, whether it's intellectual property or cash, it is the public domain. And so now the attorney general has to decide whether or not it's in the good of the people.
It doesn't apply to
Right.
profits or nonprofits.
Not apply to
Yes.
You can just do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I do, yeah.
Any questions online? Until I forgot about my own. We're good? Okay. Good? All right. Good to meet everybody. Good stuff. Go do good stuff.